Hello, welcome back to another episode of How to Read a Poem. Today we're going to do a very interesting poem by the British poet Philip Larkin. The title is called Home is So Sad. Now, of course, Philip Larkin, as you would read more of his poetry, always characteristically has a sort of witty, but at the same time dry, very ironic, almost acerbic type of voice. Now, he writes about very human concerns, universal human emotions, everyday things, and it's interesting to see how a poem about home manages to be both universal and at the same time a deeply emotional poem. So let's begin. Home is so sad. Now the first line of the poem already begins with the home, the domestic space. A personification is used immediately to tie in the human emotions to the space in which human beings live and live out most part of their lives. Home is so sad. Now in this first line already, Larkin takes us on a striking assertion. Home, after all, is a place of comfort, is a place of safety. Home is something that we define against the outside world. It is a space we return to when we need to feel that sense of security, that sense of belonging, that sense of family. So the poem starts already with an almost counterintuitive assertion. Home is so sad. Now the personification works to tie in the human emotions to the physical space. So already we are alerted to the fact that this poem is not only going to be about the things, physical objects in the home, but also the human emotions associated with the home. Home is both physical and a carrier of emotion. So home is so sad. Now why is home so sad? Larkin then goes on to explain. It stays as it was left. So once again, home is imbued with almost human qualities, and that is evidenced through the verbs. It stays as it was left. However, this staying is also a form of stasis, is also a form of immobility. Home is caught as it last was, shaped to the comfort of the last to go. Of course, last to go, the human being. Now, home takes on the shape of the human habitant, the person who stays in the home. Now, this person has left. So again, we are alerted. This poem is not only about home, it's also a poem really about loss, about leaving, about the things we leave behind, and the things we're never going to go back to. Everything is temporary. We hear that all the time. However, home is the thing that stays, it's the thing that remains. But it doesn't remain immobile, right? It doesn't remain totally without emotion. Larkin alerts us to the fact that home is shaped. It has a specific physical contour, and that physical contour is molded to the comfort of the person who was last in the physical space of the home, as if to win them back. Together with that personification, home takes on a kind of emotional appeal. Home is shaped with the purpose of winning the person who's left the home back. It's almost as if home is characterized as a supplicant, someone who begs, come back, come back. Instead, bereft of anyone to please, however, the brute reality hits. In a poem about loss, home is the sign of that loss. Instead, bereft of anyone to please, it withers so. Larkin next brings in that metaphor of something organic, like a plant that home is likened to. Home withers, having no heart to put aside the theft. So home withers, home has a heart, home stays, home is shaped. So all these metaphors of humanity, all these metaphors of physical life is attributed to the home. So Larkin allows us to see how a physical space, that physical environment of the home actually is a carrier, is a, we might say, repository of human emotions. It shows us what loss means. Now, loss can be intuited through actual human loss, but also can be intuited, can be sensed through the contours and the remainders of a home that has been left, that has been abandoned. So home withers so, having no heart to put aside the theft. Stanza 8 break and turn again to what it started as. Now you would see the poem using what we call enjambment. Now, what is enjambment? Notice the lines. It doesn't end on a complete punctuation. To put aside the theft, break, and turn again to what it started as. So, the enjambment is then reinforced through the stanzaic break. The theft, new stanza, turn again to what it started as. So again, it builds that sense of something almost unfinished, something incomplete, something that home is without its human inhabitants inhabiting the space or living there. And of course, you would know some background knowledge. Stanza in Italian actually means room. So Larkin might be playing on the fact that the poem is built in two stanzas of almost similar lines, in a sense that every line is regular iambic pentameter. So there's a clash then with the regularity of the stanza, the orderliness of a room, and of course contrasted with the incompletion, the mess, the melancholic longing of a home as it is left behind, as it is abandoned. So it is almost a theft. Something has been stolen unnaturally from the home. And of course, that theft, that is something that's missing, is the human being that is supposed to be living in that space. So it's immobile. It has no power to return back to what it started as. A joy short of how things ought to be. So it's almost a kind of fall from a state of completion, from a state of plenitude, from a state of original grace, if you will, to something that is broken, to something that is abandoned, to something that has no more human emotion left in it. So a joy is short of how things ought to be, long fallen wide. So we see how things ought to be, that sense of neatness, contrasted to long fallen wide. The idea of fall, that idea also of wide. Something that has gone, something that has fallen apart at the seams, something that has gone awry, we might say. So Larkin juxtaposes what we've been talking about throughout this poem, right? That sense of how home originally should be, that sense of completion, that sense of fullness. Juxtaposed to this is something that is of course withered, is something that is abandoned, is something that has long fallen wide, something that has fallen into disuse, we might say. You can see how it was. So towards the end of the poem, Larkin invokes the reader. You can see how it was in an almost kind of turn to the imagery that is home. So you can see what is the evidence of that lost sight. And the previous line, there's this idea of the shot, a joyous shot. You can see how it was. Look at the pictures and the cutlery. So when the pronoun you is invoked, of course the reader is invited to share in that experience of the poem. Larkin pulls the reader in, implicitly suggesting that this is a universal human experience. So you can see how it was. Look at the pictures and the cutlery. So it doesn't need to say any more. You can just look at the images of the abandoned house. Look at the pictures, family photos if you will, family portraits. Speaking of the former human inhabitants, speaking of a whole human world. Now that the human inhabitant is gone, the pictures somehow look empty. The pictures become just pictures. Nothing more. And the cutlery. Of course, cutlery, you might think of the Greek resonance of the word home. Of course, economics means things about the home. So, some human activities that has taken place, and that is indexed to the cutlery. The music in the piano stool. So, an inanimate piano stool has music in it. It's not just a physical piano stool. You can hear the music. But of course, Larkin ironically says it's a music that is heard only because it is absent. That vase. So the poem ends not with further argument, but the poem ends with snapshots, images of things that have been left abandoned in the home. Of course, to suggest what has been lost in that space. So we get the piano stool, we hear that music that might have been played in the past, that vase, the pictures and the cutlery. So the mood is sustained throughout the poem. It's a mood almost of elegiac force. It's a mood certainly of melancholic intensity. Something has been lost, something has been abandoned. And that brings us back to the first line. Home is so sad. So we might sense that palpability of the emotions of loss, of sadness, of grief in the home. So in this poem, right, Larkin shows us how a physical space is not really a physical space. A physical space is so much more. A physical space is a repository. A physical space is associated with memory. And all these things make more sense when the memory is gone. Of course, the idea of nostalgia also plays in. It is a nostalgic look at what we've lost and what we've left behind as we move along in life. Home is so sad. Thanks for watching.